Alright, what is up you guys? It is just your girl Ken and welcome back to my channel. I am super excited for today's video because I'm going to be responding to all of your comments from a video I did about a year ago on my other channel. It is called Everything You Need to Know Before Going to Parsons School of Design, and it is repetitively the most commented, the most asked about, the most questioned video that I have ever done. I'm super thankful it helped you guys out as much as it did. Like, that was the entire purpose of it. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you go check it out because it gives such a better overview of like the entire school, what it's like, all that stuff. I also did a separate video about specifically what it's like being an RA, how to become one, all that stuff at the new school, and I'll have both linked down below if you want to check it out. But today I have a list of topics, questions you guys asked, not only in comments of those videos, but also I get DMs just about every day like asking about it, so we're gonna go over some of those. I'll try to make it as rapid fire as possible, but I just thought, even though I respond to every DM and every comment left on those videos, I just think I can give you a more genuine, better answer in this video. So let's get into it. Something that a lot of you guys asked about and just made comments on in general was that like you're nervous to apply, you're nervous that you won't get in, and if I had any tips about the application process and if there's anything that I thought could increase your chance. And realistically, there's no favoritism involved. Like, it really does depend on the information you submit. When I applied, you had to submit 10 portfolio pieces and then essays correlating to each of those pieces. I really think my essays must have made me stand out because my portfolio pieces I just felt weren't as strong as they could be. I mentioned in the previous video I did not take art in high school, so I had to spend my free time like after school, after extracurriculars, making those pieces. And yes, some were great, but others, in my opinion, weren't as strong. So really, in that essay explaining this is why I'm submitting it, this is what skills it shows, this is why I like the piece, this is what it stands for, and just telling your story as an artist or a designer, I think that really speaks to the admissions office. But at the end of the day, like, they're looking for potential. They're not looking for perfection. They want your personality, they want you for you, so do not change that. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Another question that was asked was, do you miss out on like the large campus feeling, the large campus experience? And I would say 100% yes, you miss out on that. As I mentioned in the previous video, we do not have a campus. It is very much skyscrapers. It's a high risk, high reward situation. You don't have the pretty bubble and like comfortness that comes with a campus. There's also not as many like extracurricular things to be involved in. It's really up to you to go get involved. Community that is Manhattan, that is New York City and its surrounding boroughs. So if you're looking for like a traditional college experience, this isn't for you. That's all I have to say. It is for really driven individuals that like being independent, and specifically I would say Parsons is for creative people. Next, the next question is really hard for me to answer. People asked about if I could give a breakdown of each dorm experience and like each dorm vibe, and I'll just say the majority of the dorms that were options for me to live in while I was in school there are not options anymore. Like, we no longer have those buildings and they have opened new ones, which is super exciting. I think there's supposed to be a lot like nicer facilities than the ones we had. But I can give my opinion on two. I worked and lived in Cary Hall for 2.5, almost 3 years. It was my favorite place to live. It is the building that is right above the University Center. Super convenient location. It also, at the time, was the newest and nicest. I do think newer and nicer buildings have opened up, but that's just my experience. There's pretty good views. It's very, very, like, you cannot beat the commute to campus. You literally just take an elevator down. But I will say the downfall is that sometimes it can be isolating having school, work, social, and like everything else in literally the same building. You can get very burnt out, you can feel very like claustrophobic, and there's not as much space to like distance yourself, which some people like, some people don't, and there's ways to work around that. Typically it was a majorly upperclassmen dorm. I do think they've mixed it now to having upper and lowerclassmen. It's not really a party place to be as far as like socializing. You can make friends, but most people are just kind of like minding their own business. It's just really hard to like do anything because you're that close to so much authority. The other dorm that I'll give an opinion on is Sty. When I was there, Sty was a strictly all freshman dorm, and it was known as the party dorm, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, I will say I think every party ever thrown at the new school in a dorm has been busted. It's just really hard not to be noticed. people that lived at Stye like always were like, yeah, we bonded because we went through this experience. It's great to be around people that are going through your same thing. So if you are a freshman, I would recommend living in an all freshman dorm if that's an option, or at least on an all freshman floor. It just lets you make more friends and build a better community. My next question that I'm going to touch on that I also got pretty frequently was, is it possible to work while taking classes? And kind of just what I just said, I worked as an RA. I also worked for a jewelry designer. I did a couple other like miscellaneous things throughout my time to like pick up extra work. So I would say 100% it is possible to work part-time and even full-time if you really want to push it, depending on how much course load you're taking. I will say to each their own. I know people that didn't work. I know people that worked several jobs. I know people that had one job. It's really deciding what works with your schedule, what works with your course load, what works with your personal life. I personally needed to work to afford not only like my day-to-day expenses with food and like all that stuff, but also to make a decent living to eventually go towards my debt that I'm now paying off that I accumulated from school, as well as pay like my tuition bills every semester. So the fact that I could work basically 2 jobs, and I would say the RA job was all day, every day. Like even if you weren't on duty, you had responsibilities that needed to be taken care of every day. So even though it's not full-time hours on duty, I viewed it as a full-time job because of the responsibility and presence that were required. And then my job working for my jewelry designer, it depended on the semester, but I would work anywhere from 10 to 30 hours a week. And then in the summers when I wasn't in classes, I would work for her full-time, like 40 plus hours, which was great. I love the flexibility. She was amazing about that. But finding the right opportunities for you will let you succeed in work. And then with all that, working 30 hours for her, alright, I was taking an 18 credit course load and still made straight A's. Part of that has to do with me and my personality. I like being extra busy, so really just feel it out. But yes, please work. Most people I knew had to work. It was very rare that people didn't. So this question I was surprised I got, but someone asked, did I use a car and have a car in the city, or did I bike? And the answer is I had neither. If you can afford to have a car in the city, like props to you. That is expensive. That's gonna run you hundreds of thousands of dollars a month just in parking fees. More importantly, you really don't need it. If you live on campus or near campus, like you're gonna walk everywhere. You honestly don't even need a bike. If you are a commuter student or someone that wants to have a bike, there are places on campus for you to store a bike. For me, I just lived so close, it was more of a hassle and I didn't need one. If I was going anywhere, like I said, I would walk most times, and if not, take the subway. You just can't beat the price. You can't beat the speed of it. You can get somewhere faster on a subway than in a car. And then parking is a nightmare, so I definitely don't recommend a car. You don't need one. It's just not a necessity. I would occasionally Uber, but I would say maybe I Ubered once or twice a month. And that was only like if it was really late and I was by myself. The next question I'm going to read off of like on my phone, because this one person literally listed, I'll insert it here, but they had like 10 different questions about the program and just Parsons, and I think most of them were pretty good, so I'll just go down the list and briefly answer. First, they asked, are scholarships available for international students? Yes, to my knowledge, everyone is eligible for scholarships. When you apply to the school, you are automatically applying for certain financial aid and scholarships that are offered. I recommend everyone fill out your FAFSA because that is what the government decides, and that's separate from specifically the new school. That's what the government gives you based off your family and financial situation. But yes, through the university, everyone is eligible for scholarships. Everyone receives a different amount. It really just all depends on a lot of different things. I received one based off of my grades by making the dean's list, as well as my entering grades from high school. That's what it was based off of. But I know people that received varying amounts and for varying reasons. There's also plenty of scholarships to apply to that aren't related to the school that you can get from a third party. I do think those are pretty hard to win because you have to go through like a whole application process, but if there's a will, there's a way. Next, they asked, do you have a fixed timetable? And I wasn't exactly sure what they meant by this, but yes, each semester you have a fixed schedule of classes. At Parsons, there is a fall and a spring semester, which are each 15 weeks. Those are your traditional school year semesters. There is a summer one, but it's run differently and it counts for different things. And I never did it, so I'm not going to comment on it. But with that, for your fall semester, you will have the same schedule every single week. Granted, it's up to the teacher if they want to change things, which sometimes they do, but I'd say very rarely. Like whatever you sign up for at the beginning of the semester, that's what your schedule is going to look like. I will say another thing. it wasn't asking any questions, but this is maybe important and I was talking to friends about it the other day. Our like absentee policy is pretty strict. You were allowed to miss 2 classes, excused or unexcused, but on your third absence, you automatically failed the course, which is pretty strict. But if you're, and I understand life happens and it's a little unfortunate, but you have to be there. Like if you're looking to slack off and not show up, this is not the school for you. It's way too much money to not be going to class and failing things because you just simply didn't show up. Number 3, it says, does Parsons help you get a job? And boy, this was a common question. But no, there is no guarantee going in that you come out with a job. There is no set program to mentor you and show you jobs. Yes, they have alumni boards. Yes, they have career fairs. But to be honest, in my opinion, they are very, very, very under-focused, underfunded, and unsuccessful. And part of this, I try not to take personally because I graduated in 2021. It was a tough year in the pandemic. It was a tough year for the school to really do anything normally or productively. So also take my opinion with a grain of salt on that. I will say they tend to do more for the larger majors. Fashion has hundreds of students. Product design, I graduated with 30 people. They're gonna give you more opportunities and have more career fairs designated to fashion students, if that kind of makes sense. But I also know fashion students that aren't employed right now. Like, it just all depends. I will say teachers and your peers help you a lot, so definitely use them as networking, but it's also just not a sure thing. There's only so many jobs out there in this world, and they are popular and competitive. She asked in her next question, are short courses available? No. How the course calendar is set up is the courses offered in the fall are only offered in the fall, and the courses in the spring are only offered in the spring. There are a couple that go back and forth, like university lectures and more gen ed things, but as far as like when you get into your specific program curriculum, like every sophomore as a product design major will take the same classes. Yes, you'll have different teachers and different time offerings occasionally, but you will all be fundamentally doing the same thing, and that goes for every major at every grade point, which is a little frustrating. So say you're a sophomore, you did your first semester in the fall, and you want to take a semester off. You're gonna have to wait till the following year in the spring to then take those courses, because they don't, like, you very much have to do it in order. And like if you start, I recommend going through the 8th semester. No, you can't do it any shorter, at least not in Parsons. I think other schools at the new school can have an accelerated program, or if you do the BAFA program, which is technically a 5-year program where you do Lang and Parsons courses, there are ways to speed that up. It's just hard. They next asked, do you need to know how to draw and be really creative to be in Parsons? You do not have to be the most expert drawer in the entire world. I will say one of your fundamental gen ed courses is drawing and imaging, and they do teach you the fundamentals of how to draw digitally and physically, which is a fun class, but it doesn't have to be like your strongest suit. You should feel comfortable doing it, and it will help you the better you are at it and the more you practice, but it doesn't have to be everything. A lot is done digitally in Photoshop and just rendering in general. But as far as being creative, yes, if you do not like a creative atmosphere, creative problem solving, like this is not for you. Like I don't think you can get a more artsy environment. They ask about, do fashion majors like get to put dresses on models, and are there like fashion shows? I feel like Project Runway kind of skews the perception of this. You can have your friends model your clothes, you can hire people to model your clothes to take pictures and stuff, but most people I know in the fashion program just put them on forums for their final critique. Like, I never saw a fashion show. And I'm not a fashion major, so maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't think there's fashion shows walking around like that. Next, they asked, do you get to roam between lectures? Again, this is all depending on how you set up your schedule. You can schedule them so it's back to back, so you just have 30 minutes, which really is just enough time for you to get to your next class in between classes, or you can have them days apart. It's really up to you. That's the end of this long question. I'll go back to my personal list here. Someone asked, do you have a lot of assignments? This is a tricky one to answer because no, in my opinion, you don't have classes that you have something due every single time you meet, but you have very long-ended projects, and a lot of times the teachers aren't going to give you, hey, I want X, Y, and Z delivered on these days. You have to make that structure for yourself, which honestly, in my opinion, is the hardest thing you have to teach yourself, and the biggest learning lesson you take away from Parsons. You learn your design process and what that looks like. They'll tell you, you have 6 weeks to get this done, we'll have a midterm, But in between the midterm and the final, it's up to you how you go about creating. There's times where I've struggled. There's times where I'm like, man, I wish I had a deliverable due today just so I had the courage to do something. There's weeks where I wouldn't do homework because I wanted to be social, wanted to do other things, but I had to make up that time later. My best advice is to constantly be working on your projects, even if it's small steps throughout every week, throughout every day, if possible. Someone next asked, do you recommend getting a tablet or a laptop? 1000% I say get a laptop. There are so many different softwares and programs that you use that need to be downloaded on a computer, such as the Adobe Creative Suite. You need essential. There's also rendering softwares like Keyshot, Fusion 360, Rhino, SolidWorks, InDesign, AutoCAD, Inventor, so many things that only are applicable on a computer. They do have school computers that you can use at any time for free as long as a class isn't scheduled in those computer labs, which again I recommend if you're doing a lot of rendering, but a computer just can hold so many more softwares and make your work mobile and more versatile and lots of better things. The only thing I see people use iPads for if they use like a Procreate or a stylus to do drawing in certain apps, but I just don't think it's essential. Maybe if you were an illustration major, but from my experience, everyone just has a laptop. Alright, another frequent topic that got brought up was transfer students. Now, I did not transfer. I didn't know a lot of people that did transfer, and part of that comes back to my topic of the courses only being offered certain semesters at a time. Parsons has very specialized courses, clearly for specialized degrees. It is hard to equate those when you transfer to something that's a little bit more traditional. And even if you were to transfer programs within the school, I think it's very impossible. If you were a junior in the architecture program and wanted to transfer and become a fashion student, you would have to start the fashion program from scratch. Your gen eds from year one would transfer, but you would have to go back and start as a sophomore in the fashion program because most things don't transfer. You're not on the same course and on the same track to do the fashion courses. And that's just how it is. So my advice, figure out what you like early. I am so thankful I wasn't someone to have to switch or wanted to switch. With that same point, I imagine it's tough to switch in. I think if you came from another design school, they would be flexible with you. But I think they just take it on a case-by-case basis because it's not as easy as switching business degrees from two regular state universities where their prerequisites would be a little bit more aligned. But needless to say, I don't think they would turn you down. I think they would try to work with you. At the end of the day, like, they're a business and they want your business as a student. It's definitely worth a shot. I have another one that I got as a DM that I want to read. This person said that they're considering applying to Parsons and watched my original video and wanted to ask specifically about the social scene and party scene at Parsons. They said throughout high school they struggled socially, and I'm looking forward to college that allows them to have a fresh start. They also said that they were a big party person and was hoping to get into a wet dorm when they were freshmen or underage. Like, how do people regularly go out? All those kind of things. And to touch on that, social scene, when I say this, I don't mean it insulting, but I would say most people there are loners. A lot of people, like, you can ask them to hang out and they're going to want to go work on their projects. They're going to go work on their, like, freelance stuff, because a lot of people in school also do freelance design on the side. But I will say you can find a good group of people that are going to want to do what you want to do. It just might not look exactly what it would at a normal university or how you envisioned it. I would say a party scene specifically on campus, there's no partying. They will hold events and galas, but that's very rare. And dorm life is just not meant for partying, in my opinion. At least at the new school, it's just not set up that way. Occasionally you'll go to like an NYU apartment party, but that's if you like know people that go there, and they're okay. Like, it's a small space with lots of people and it's really not all that. If you're going out, you're typically going to bars and clubs, and I would say as you get older, most people go out maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. But there's also people that go out every single night. So it's really up to you, whatever you want it to be. I will say clubs and bars in New York are 21 plus, but I went out when I was under 21. But also be careful with that because that comes with its own risk. As far as having a fresh start, I would say this is one of the best places you could get a fresh start. I didn't know anyone from my high school going to New York. No one even from the state of North Carolina went to Parsons. So I just got to be whoever I wanted to be. And I would say not only the city of New York, but also the school of the new school is just so accepting. Can you get into a wet dorm if you're underage? Yes, I do think most dorms nowadays are a mix between upper and lower classmen. And all I'll say as a former RA, if you don't give me a reason to come looking for anything, we're not going to look. If you're quiet, if you're with your friends, if it's low key, like we're not coming in to bust you. It's when you play loud music really late at night and people have a noise complaint, or you're screaming at the top of your lungs playing drinking games, that people come in and they're like, okay, what are you doing? And even if you're of age, that stuff doesn't fly because it doesn't meet the community guidelines that you agreed to as like an entire floor. You can't cause chaos like that. But I will say, as a freshman, if they don't see it, they don't know, and they're not there to look. They're there to mind their own business. So put it in a bag, carry it in, ain't nobody gonna know. And then the very last one that I'll end off on, and this is the one that I get DM'd and commented the most, is, do I think it was worth it? Like, how do you justify spending so much money on this degree? And really, to each their own. Like, I will never sit here and tell anyone what to do. It's really a personal choice you need to make for yourself. I know some people consult with their families and consult with people that could be helping them out, paying for it, and that's important, but at the end of the day, I truly believe it's your decision. I do think you should educate yourself and really map out when you graduate if it costs X amount, and these are going to be your average monthly costs as far as food, extracurriculars, whatever else that might add up. Get a ballpark number of how much debt you're going to be in and think, do I want to pay that off for however many years? Is it worth it to me? That's what I did before I went. Another thing that for me that really drove me to do it was I knew at some point in my life I always wanted to live in New York City, and it's expensive regardless of when you go, so why not do it when I was getting an education? And I really banked on being an RA to help afford it, and thankfully I was able to do that. That is a very hard position to get, and it's not a position for everyone, but it definitely helped me out by providing my room and board for 2.5 years. I will say it's definitely a little disappointing not having a job post-grad, and I'm coming up on a year of being unemployed and being graduated, so that's frustrating. But I also don't think a job necessarily determines your success and the education you got. I'm so confident in myself. I've learned a lot about design, I've learned a lot about the world, and that stuff I just find like priceless. I wouldn't change like my education and my experience for the world. No matter where you go to school, I think you'll always question, like, is it worth it? Just because the idea of college and paying so much money, regardless if that's a community college tuition or a private institution tuition, regardless of the difference, like, it is a lot of money to pay, and there's so many resources out there that are cheaper than getting a 4-year university degree. That's really going to come down to what you want and what experiences you want to have. I know I really valued that time to figure out myself, figure out what I wanted in life, and then I just think the education that came along with Parsons, as well as being at the new school in Manhattan, like, helped shape me as a human as I want to be going forward. I'm thankful I got to spend that like really important time in your life there. It's also kind of the attitude you have. I knew I was gonna love it because I was determined to love it and determined to get the most out of what I put in. If you're not willing to put 110% of yourself into your college education, maybe this isn't the school for you, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong to acknowledge it. But that's gonna wrap up this video. I hope it helped. Check out the other ones like I said, but if I did miss anything, I feel like I answered a lot. Feel free to comment down below and I'll try to respond, or maybe even do another one if you have more specific questions. Good luck to everyone applying or deciding that they want to go, but be sure to like and subscribe because I'm sure I'll do more things relating to Parsons or talking about my experience, or even, hopefully soon, what I do as a post-grad. But I love you, but I'll see you next week.